A very good morning to all of you. This is Dr. Kaustubh S. Thackeray, and today we are going to discuss about the most important part of the examination, that is case history. Case history is recorded to reach up to a diagnosis, treatment plan, and to assess the prognosis of the patient. In case history, first we are going to record the personal history of the patient or personal information of the patient, which includes the name of the patient. The name of the patient is important to know so that we can establish a rapport with the patient and patient will be comfortable with you. Second, in that we are going to record the age of the patient. The age of the patient is important because few of the periodontal diseases are common at particular age group. Like when we talk about acute herpetic gingiostomatitis, it is commonly seen in the age group of 0 to 6 years. When we talk about the localized aggressive periodontitis, it is commonly seen around the age group of 18 to 19, and chronic periodontitis is commonly seen after the age group of 30. Similarly, when we record the gender of the patient, the gender has also got some importance. Few of the diseases they are commoner in males, while as few of the diseases they are commoner in females. The hormone related diseases like puberty induced gingivitis, pregnancy induced gingivitis, they are commonly seen in females as compared to that of the males. Aggressive periodontitis in few of the countries it is commonly seen in females, and in some of the countries it is commonly seen in males. Chronic periodontitis in developing countries is commonly seen in females because of nutritional deficiency, because of more pregnancies. While as in developed countries, the incidence or prevalence of chronic periodontitis is similar in males as well as in females. Then we go on to record the address of the patient. The address of the patient is recorded for the record purpose and also to assess that few diseases which are commoner in particular area of the locality, whether he is exposed to those diseases or not. Then we record the OPD number. The OPD number is recorded for medico-legal purposes and also for the record purpose. Once this is completed, a proper rapport is established with the patient. Now patient is more comfortable and he is going to tell you about his each and every suffering. Then we go on to record the chief complaint of the patient. Chief complaint of the patient should be recorded in patient's own words. Now when we record chief complaint for periodontal disease, it is different from the chief complaint which we are recording in the other field of the medicine. In periodontitis or in periodontal disease, we want to record the chief complaint to know about the sufferings of the patient, so that once these sufferings are relieved, then we can reach up to a diagnosis and proper treatment can be given to the patient. As I told you, that chief complaint should be recorded in patient's own words. Once it is recorded, we have to record the history of the present illness, which are the aggravating factors, which are relieving factors, when the particular type of the problem increases or decreases, and a detailed history of present illness should be taken. Here I want to suggest to the exam going students that if you are taking a chief complaint, then you should know thoroughly about the chief complaint. For example, if your patient is complaining of pain, the first question which examiner is going to ask you is that what is the reason for pain in this disease or in this condition. So you should be thorough about which conditions can lead to pain. Now when we talk from periodontal point of view, there are 4 conditions which usually lead to pain, and these are acute gingival diseases, periapical abscess, periodontal abscess, and vertical food infection. So if you are writing your chief complaint as pain, be sure that any 4 of these conditions must be present in the patient. Once this is over, you are going to record the past dental history of the patient. In the past dental history, you are going to ask about exfoliation or extraction of teeth. Now, what is the significance of recording exfoliation and extraction of the teeth? You have to ask the patient regarding the reason for extraction of teeth. If patient is saying that it was because of loosening, then you have to take into account that since how many years the tooth was extracted, because it will help you to diagnose whether the disease is aggressive or chronic periodontitis. You have to also ask about the exfoliation and when the exfoliation was done. Apart from that, it is also important to know whether patient had some allergies while extraction of the teeth related to the local anesthetic solution, or was there any problem like low blood pressure or fainting or something related during the extraction. Once this is over, you are going to ask patient about the drug history. Drug history is important to know whether patient has got any allergies to particular group of the drugs or not. It is also important to know the family history of the patient, as aggressive periodontitis is commonly seen in the families. Particularly localized and generalized aggressive periodontitis, it is commonly seen in siblings. The next important part of case history is past medical history. The past medical history is important to record because we are going to assess three conditions. The first is systemic diseases which can affect periodontal tissues, systemic diseases which will require alteration in the periodontal treatment plan, and systemic diseases which are usually manifested in the periodontal tissues. The diseases which are commonly seen in the first group are diabetes and leukemia. The diseases which are commonly seen in the second group or which we have to record in the second group are diabetes, hypertension, leukemia, any kind of blood disorder, and third, that is the periodontal manifestations of the systemic disease which are commonly seen in the oral cavity are diseases like as chronic discomfort gingivitis. Now this group of the diseases includes lichen planus, pemphigus vulgaris. So accordingly, if proper medical history is taken, we can formulate the proper treatment plan for the patient. Once your medical history is completed, we move on to the personal history of the patient. The personal history of the patient will help us to know regarding the oral hygiene status of the patient and overall the patient's attitude towards the maintenance of the oral hygiene. We are going to record about the brush and type of the brush used, which brushing technique patient is utilizing, which kind of the interdental aids patient is using, and overall the frequency of the brushing. After that, we are also going to ask about the habits, like any of the harmful habits which include smoking or tobacco chewing or betel nut chewing. We are going to take into record because if these of the habits are present, even the treatment plan is going to get altered and even the prognosis is going to get altered. Once this is over, then we are going to move to the next part, which is extraoral examination. And in today's discussion, we are basically going to talk much about the extraoral examination and intraoral examination. Let us now talk about the extraoral examination. The first point which we are going to assess in extraoral examination is facial symmetry. Facial symmetry assessment is conducted in a systematic way in which patient is either standing or in sitting position comfortably with natural head position. When I am talking about natural head position, it is that position of the head in which patient is feeling comfortable. The patient's teeth should be closed in centric occlusion and lips should be in the rest position. Actually, slightly bilaterally asymmetrical face is absolutely normal, but if any kind of the gross abnormality or gross asymmetry is present, then we have to assess the etiology behind that. There are four causes of facial asymmetry. They are classified as inflammatory, acquired, congenital, and developmental. The most common out of these four is inflammatory. The inflammatory kind of the facial asymmetry is commonly seen because of pulpal and periodontal diseases in which facial planes of the face are included. Second is acquired kind of the facial asymmetry, which might be because of injury or diseases like temporomandibular joint ankylosis or fractures of the bone. Third is congenital. Congenital, it might be because of cleft lip or cleft palate or hemifacial microsomia. And fourth is developmental. It is because of any trauma or accident which has occurred during the developmental stage of the growth. Out of these four, the most important for us is inflammatory kind of the facial asymmetry. As I have told, it might be because of pulpal disease or periodontal disease. Now we need to identify whether this facial asymmetry is occurred because of the pulpal disease or periodontal disease. There are few differentiating points which we have to take into account. First, if facial asymmetry is gross, then it might be because of periapical pathology, that is pulpal in origin. Usually, the diseases of periodontal origin, they do not lead to more amount of the swelling, and as such facial asymmetry is not seen. The next point in extraoral examination is temporomandibular joint examination. Temporomandibular joint is articulation of condyle of the mandible with glenoid fossa of the temporal bone. While assessing temporomandibular joint, you have to look for the normal movement of the mandible while opening and closing mouth. You have to look for any clicking sound or crepitus while opening mouth and any deviation of the mandible while opening mouth. While assessing temporomandibular joint, there are two types of palpation of temporomandibular joint. The first is called as lateral palpation and the another one is posterior palpation. First I will talk about the lateral palpation. For lateral palpation, you have to use two index finger or two fingers of two hands. The first type of palpation is lateral palpation. In lateral palpation, two fingers of two hands are kept in front of tragus of the ear and ask your patient to open mouth. Here you have to appreciate the deviation of the mandible while opening mouth, any pain while opening mouth, any kind of the clicking sound while opening mouth. You can see there was no pain to the patient. The movement of the mandible was around 35 to 40 millimeter, which is absolutely normal. Slight amount of the deviation of mandible was there, but this was not much, and I can say that this temporomandibular joint is absolutely fine. The second type of palpation of temporomandibular joint is called as posterior palpation. In posterior palpation, two little fingers of two hands are kept inside the ear of the patient and ask your patient to open the mouth. Here you have to again evaluate whether there is any deviation of the mandible while opening mouth, any kind of the pain, clicking sound or crepitus heard while opening mouth. This is how you are going to identify whether the temporomandibular joint is normal or not. The third point in assessment is limb competency. The limb competency is natural position of the upper and the lower limb without any effort at the rest position. Usually the limbs are competent, but in few patients the limbs are incompetent, that limbs are not matching with each other in the rest position. It is usually seen in mouth breathers and it leads to gingivitis because of dryness of gingiva. Let us now see whether the lips are competent or incompetent in this patient. You can see patient is in relaxed position but the lips are not matching. There is no contact between the upper lip and the lower lip. It suggests that there is incompetency of the lip. This incompetency is basically because of proclination of maxillary anteriors. This will lead to mouth breathing habit, which will lead to dryness of the gingiva, and further it will lead to gingivitis. Let us now see the next part of extraoral examination. This part is assessment of lymph nodes. The lymph nodes which are commonly assessed for periodontal diseases are submental lymph nodes, submandibular lymph nodes, parotid lymph nodes, jugulo-digastric lymph nodes and jugulo-omohyoid lymph nodes. Before starting with the examination, we should be aware that which teeth drain into which lymph nodes. Lower anteriors, they drain into submental lymph nodes. All other teeth apart from lower anteriors, they drain into submandibular lymph nodes, and sometimes few molars might drain into jugulo-digastric lymph nodes. While examining the lymph nodes, you have to ask your patient to lean forwards or to incline the head forwards and to lean the head to the sides. This is done to relax the muscles around the lymph nodes. While assessing the lymph nodes, operator should stand behind the patient, ask the patient to incline forwards, and now we will see how submental lymph nodes are palpated. Patient head is inclined forwards. Try to roll the lymph nodes on the inner aspect of the mandible. When you are assessing submandibular lymph nodes, ask the patient to tilt the head to the side and roll the lymph nodes on the inner aspect of the mandible. For preauricular or parotid lymph nodes, you have to palpate in front of the ear. For jugulo-digastric and jugulo-omohyoid lymph nodes, first you should identify sternocleidomastoid muscle. Anterior to sternocleidomastoid muscle, here you can palpate jugulo-digastric lymph nodes, and here you can palpate jugulo-omohyoid lymph nodes. Usually when you are examining the lymph nodes, because of any periodontal disease, there are 4 conditions in which lymph nodes get enlarged. These are acute gingival lesions, periapical abscess, periodontal abscess, and few cases of localized aggressive periodontitis. I have specifically talked about periodontal reasons. There are other reasons also like cancer, metastasis, tuberculosis, glandular fever. But here, if we are talking about periodontal diseases, these are the 4 diseases which can lead to lymph node enlargement.
Fumident Infection Control in Healthcare, in association with Agastya Quality Concept, a complete solution for NABH accreditation, presents Infection Control Package for Dental Clinics. The dental clinic package includes products, training to clinic nurse or attendants, quality certification, marketing of the clinic, and a bacteria-free display board. Fumident will customize the product in the package according to the clinician's need. The products include personal protective equipment, disinfectants and steriliants. Fumident will also train your clinic's nurses or attendants clinical contact area disinfection and water channel disinfection, disinfection and sterilization of instrument. fumigation or fogging. It will also provide machines for fogging and fumigation on a monthly rental basis. Fumidant will provide quality certification for your clinic, a bacteria-free display board outside your clinic. Fumidant will also do marketing for your clinic in your locality by distributing free consultation pass. What's more, cashback coupon will be available with every package.
Let us now talk about the intraoral examination. While going for intraoral examination, you have to be very particular about which instruments you are going to use. This is anti-fog mouth mirror. This is normal mouth mirror. This is Williams graduated periodontal probe. This is UNC probe. This is Explorer, tweezer and Nibber's probe. Regarding different types of probes and Nibber's probe, I will be talking in detail when we will be discussing about periodontal status. As it is, all the details of the instruments are given in instrument section of the book. Intraoral examination is again divided into two: evaluation of the hard tissue and examination of the soft tissue. In hard tissue examination, we are going to look for number of the teeth present, any missing tooth, wasting diseases like effraction, atresion, erosion and abrasion, any kind of caries present and any kind of restoration present. First we will see the number of the teeth present. Here in this patient you can see all teeth are present. Usually while recording the number of the teeth present, we are not giving much importance to the third molar. We all know that third molar is called as stepchild of the dentition, which has not got many function in the newer era. Second is any kind of missing tooth. Now students, that should take into consideration that consequences of missing first molar, lower first molar, is commonly asked question in Viva also and during the theory examination also. So you have to be thorough regarding the consequences of missing lower first molar as well as upper first molar. Third point is wasting diseases. We all know that wasting diseases are atresion, abrasion, erosion and effraction. The first in that is atresion. Atresion is usually seen on the occlusal surfaces or incisal surfaces of the teeth, and it is because of tooth to tooth contact in function or in parafunction. The second kind of the wasting disease is abrasion. Abrasion is usually seen on the cervical areas of the teeth, more towards the cementum, as it is occurring because of the mechanical wearing away of the tooth, which is commonly seen because of toothbrush trauma or aggressive toothbrushing. Third is erosion. The erosion, it is commonly seen on the enamel surface. It is in contrast to that of the abrasion, which is commonly seen on the cemental surface. Erosion occurs because of acidic beverages. And fourth is effraction. The effraction, it occurs because of flexure or microfracture of the tooth, where there is loss of tooth substance in the cervical area. The commonly asked question is how to differentiate between abrasion and effraction. In abrasion, you see a saucer shaped defect. I will not be able to show you this defect here because she is not having any kind of the abrasion. But usually you have to remember that abrasion is a saucer shaped defect seen in the cervical area, while effraction, it is a triangular defect seen in the cervical area. Effraction can be seen below the gingival margin also, while as abrasion, it is not seen below the gingival margin. It is usually above the gingival margin only. The next part is assessment of caries. For assessment of caries, we have to be particular that we are using Explorer. You can see we are getting a catch here with the Explorer. That means caries are present, and these caries can be frankly seen also. The importance of recording caries in periodontal case history chart is that caries, they act as plaque retentive factors. So if they are not treated properly, it might lead to more amount of the plaque accumulation, and also it might lead to endoperioral lesions. The next part is assessment of restoration, any kind of the restoration present in the oral cavity. In case history pro forma, we are writing whether the restoration is proper or improper. Now what exactly is the meaning of improper restoration? So we have to assess for the occlusal surface of restoration, regarding the cervical surface of the restoration, whether any overhanging margins are present or not, whether the restoration is over contoured and under contoured. And one thing which you have to keep in mind, there's all these factors might lead to some problem to the periodontium if restoration is not proper. And the basic problem is it leads to more amount of the plaque accumulation, which will further aggravate the periodontal disease. Another part is evaluation of the soft tissue. While evaluating the soft tissue, we have to evaluate labial mucosa, then buccal mucosa, floor of the mouth, जीभ काढा बाहेर, tongue, lateral surface of the tongue, and palate, hard palate as well as soft palate. We are assessing all these soft tissues to look for any kind of the white lesions, red lesions, because many of the times if patient is having any kind of the habit, some lesions will be seen on the oral cavity which might be precancerous lesion. Apart from that, if patient is having chronic desquamatogingivitis like lichen planus, pemphigus vulgaris, then some kind of the lesions will also be seen on the buccal cavity, on the buccal mucosa, and also on the labial mucosa as well as on the gingiva. The next in intraoral examination is halitosis. We have to evaluate halitosis. Basically in this section I will be telling you how to evaluate whether the halitosis is caused because of oral causes or systemic causes. We all know there are different causes for halitosis which are classified as oral causes or systemic causes. So let us see whether this halitosis the patient is having is because of oral cause or because of systemic cause. Now you have to close the nose of the patient and ask your patient to breathe from the mouth. And then you have to see whether patient is having halitosis emanating from the mouth or not. Now in this case it is emanating from the mouth, so I can clearly say that it is because of the oral causes. Next is to evaluate whether the halitosis is occurring because of systemic cause or not. For that, ask your patient to hold some amount of the water in the mouth and then ask your patient to breathe. And you have to see whether the bad odor is emanating from the nose or not. In this case, it is not emanating from the nose and it was basically from the oral cavity. So I can clearly say that this halitosis in this patient is because of the oral causes and not because of the systemic causes. The next important part is recording gingival status of the patient. Gingival status is recorded to know whether the disease is in active stage or inactive stage. There are different criteria which we are going to assess in gingival status, and first out of that is color of the gingiva. The color of the gingiva, if it is reddish, it indicates that disease is in active stage, and if it is pinkish, then it indicates that the disease is in inactive stage. There are several factors which are associated with color of gingiva, like keratinization of gingiva, vascularity of the gingiva, presence of any melanin containing pigments. All are the factors which decides color of the gingiva. Next part is contour of gingiva. The contour of the gingiva is usually knife-edged and pointed in the interdental papilla. Here you can see the margins are rolled out and papilla are usually blunt. So this leads to more accumulation of the plaque. You can appreciate the presence of the plaque in this condition. Third is consistency of gingiva. Consistency of gingiva is usually firm and resilient. In cases of more inflammation, it is soft and edematous, and in cases of long-term disease, it is firm and fibrotic. In this case, there is mixture of soft and edematous consistency and firm and fibrotic consistency also. So if you are writing the case history pro forma of this patient, you have to write mixed consistency, that is mixture of soft and edematous and firm and fibrotic. Next is size of gingiva. The size of the gingiva, we have to write whether it is increased or not. You can clearly appreciate the swelling of gingiva in this case. So this indicates that size of the gingiva is increased. Next is surface texture. For evaluating the surface texture, the first point which you have to follow is that you have to switch off the dental light. After switching the dental light, you have to take a cotton piece, dry the gingiva adequately, and then appreciate the orange peel like appearance, that is stippling, which will be present basically on the attached gingiva and central part of the interdental papilla. It is not present on the lateral parts of the interdental papilla and on the marginal gingiva. The next important part is to assess bleeding on probing. Bleeding on probing, if it is present, it indicates the active stage of the disease. To assess bleeding on probing, you have to move probe from the distal papilla to the mesial papilla, wait for few seconds like 15 to 30 seconds, and then appreciate whether the bleeding is present or not. If bleeding is present, it indicates that this is the active stage of the disease. The next part is to assess exudation. Exudation is as such a secondary sign of examination. It does not indicate severity of the disease. That means if more amount of the pus is present, the disease might be mild also or severe also. For assessing the exudation, you have to apply digital pressure like this, and then you have to see whether the pus is getting expressed or not. Here you can see the pus is getting expressed, and this pus just indicates that this is active stage of the disease and non-surgical therapy is required in this patient before going for surgical therapy. Last point in gingival status is assessment of position of gingiva. The position of the gingiva, it is basically classified into two, that is apparent position and actual position. Apparent position is position of the gingival margin without inserting any kind of the probe. Here you can see with naked eyes what is the apparent position of the gingiva. I can see the gingival margin clearly. For checking the actual position of the gingiva, you have to take a probe, you have to insert that probe inside the gingival sulcus, and then you have to evaluate the relationship of the base of the pocket with cemento-enamel junction. If your probe is going beyond cemento-enamel junction apically, then attachment loss has occurred. If it is stopping at cemento-enamel junction, that means attachment loss has not occurred. This actual position of gingiva is very important point because here only you will come to know whether this is a case of periodontitis or not. If your probe is going apical to cemento-enamel junction, in this case it is going apical to cemento-enamel junction, that means attachment loss has occurred. But if the probe is not going beyond or apical to cemento-enamel junction, then it is just a case of gingivitis, whatever may be the pocket depth, because the pockets are pseudo pockets. Many of the times you get to hear two terms, that is hidden recession and visible recession. So I will try to explain what is the difference between visible recession and hidden recession. Here this is cemento-enamel junction and gingival margin is receded apical to the cemento-enamel junction, and clearly the recession is visible. So this is visible recession. Now just have a look on this tooth. Here as such no recession is visible, but when you insert the probe inside the gingival sulcus, then your probe is going apical to the cemento-enamel junction, and this kind of the recession is called as hidden recession. In other words, the attachment loss when it is equal to the pocket depth, that kind of the pocket depth is called as hidden recession. One more point which you have to take into consideration, that when you are probing the sulcus, your probe should be parallel to the long axis of the tooth, basically on the facial and the lingual surfaces. But if you are probing it on the interdental surface, then it should be slightly angulated. As we all know, the probing pressure should be around 25 grams. Now we will be starting with the periodontal status of the patient. In periodontal status, we will be recording probing pocket depth, clinical attachment loss, gingival recession, pathologic migration of the tooth, mobility of the tooth, furcation involvement, and different kind of mucogingival problems. First, I will be starting with probing pocket depth. Probing pocket depth is usually recorded from gingival margin to the point where we can insert the probe inside the gingival sulcus. Patient is having pain, so I have to stop it at this point, and I can see in this case the probing pocket depth is around 5 mm. So we are basically recording it from the gingival margin to the base of the pocket. The probing pocket depth has to be evaluated on all the surfaces of the teeth, like on the labial surface, on mesial surface, on distal surface, and also on the palatal surface of the tooth. There is one more term which is called as walking of the probe. In walking of the probe, we have to perform circumferential probing, in which the probe is inserted in the gingival sulcus at one point. The probing pocket depth is recorded, then partially it is taken out and it is moved on to the next surface, and again it is reinserted there. Again we are evaluating the probing pocket depth here. Again partially it is taken out and moved on to the next surface, and again it is reinserted. As such, we are evaluating the probing pocket depth around all the surfaces of the teeth. This will help us to evaluate what will be the morphology of the bone, whether it is regular or irregular. Next point, the probing pocket depth is recorded to know the treatment plan. If probing pocket depth is around 3 mm to 4 mm, we can go for non-surgical treatment, and if it is more than 4, that is 5 mm or more than 5 mm, then we have to go for flap surgery, that is surgical therapy. The second point is clinical attachment loss. The clinical attachment loss is measured from cement-to-enamel junction to the base of the pocket. Now first we have to identify cement-to-enamel junction. For identifying cement-to-enamel junction, we have to slide the probe, and with tactile sensation we have to appreciate the difference between the enamel and the cementum. Here I can appreciate the difference, so I will keep my probe like this and I can say this is cement-to-enamel junction. So from cement-to-enamel junction to the base of the pocket, the distance is measured, and this is basically clinical attachment loss. Clinical attachment loss is measured to evaluate the severity of the disease. If it is 1 to 2 mm, the severity is mild. If 3 to 4 mm, the severity is moderate, and if it is 5 or more than 5, the severity is severe. Here, sometimes the problem which occurs is that calculus is present and you are not able to exactly find out the cement-to-enamel junction. You can see on this tooth, you can appreciate the calculus. In such cases, you have to remove the calculus first on that tooth, and then you have to measure probing pocket depth as well as clinical attachment loss. In some cases where you are not able to identify cement-to-enamel junction, then you have to take a fixed point on the tooth. For example, this is incisal edge. I will consider this as a fixed point and I will measure the clinical attachment loss from fixed point on the tooth like this. But here, rather than calling it as clinical attachment loss, we call it as relative attachment loss, or RAL. The third point is evaluation of furcation involvement. The point which you have to always remember in this case is the root trunk length. We know usually the root trunk length is 4 mm. So if you are recorded your pocket or clinical attachment loss 4 or more than 4, then definitely the furcation will be involved. You don't know the grade of the furcation, whether it is grade 1, 2, 3 or 4, but definitely there is some kind of the furcation involvement which you have to then confirm with the help of Neighbors probe. On this Neighbors probe, different kinds of marking are present, and usually these markings are 3, 6, 9 and 12 mm. You have to check how much Neighbors probe is going inside horizontally. This end of the Neighbors probe is used for the buccal surface, and this end can be utilized for the lingual surface. If you are just getting a catch in the furcation entrance area, then it is grade 1. If your probe is penetrating partially into the furcation area, then it is grade 2. If it is going through and through, it is grade 3. And if it is going through and through and this gingiva is also receded, then it is grade 4. Sometimes you get a case where gingiva is receded but your probe is not going through and through, or it is going partially. So in this case it will not be grade 4, it will be grade 2 only. The next part is assessment of mobility. We all know that mobility is divided into 3 grades: grade 1, grade 2 and grade 3. In case of grade 1, there is buccolingual movement which is 0.2 to 1 mm. Grade 2, it is either buccolingual or mesiodistal movement more than 1 mm, and grade 3 is more than 2 mm of the movement in buccolingual or mesiodistal direction or in vertical direction. So for this you have to use 2 fingers and then you have to assess the mobility of the tooth. Here you can see the mobility of the tooth is in buccolingual direction and it is less than 1 mm. So it is grade 1 mobility. Sometimes you can use one finger and handle of another instrument to check the mobility of the tooth. There are different types of instruments which can be used for assessing mobility. They are called as periodontometer, mobilometer, period test, or resonance frequency analysis, that is Austell device. In case of grade 1 mobility, the treatment is routine periodontal therapy. In case of grade 2 mobility, the treatment is routine periodontal therapy along with splinting of the teeth, and in grade 3 the usual treatment is extraction of the teeth. Let us now come to the next part, that is gingival recession. For gingival recession, we have to assess the distance between gingival margin and cement to enamel junction. So it is basically the apical receding of gingival margin, which we call it as gingival recession. In this case, you can see 2 mm of the gingival recession has occurred. Gingival recession clinically has been classified into 4 classes, that is class 1, class 2, class 3 and class 4. In class 1, the gingival recession does not exceed up to the mucogingival junction. In 2, 3 and 4, it exceeds up to the mucogingival junction, or also sometimes it is beyond the mucogingival junction. So first thing is we have to identify mucogingival junction. For mucogingival junction identification, we have a test which is called as roll test. So let us now see how the roll test is performed. In case of roll test, you have to take a blunt instrument and it is moved from movable tissue to the non-movable tissue. The point at which the movement of the tissue stops is mucogingival junction. You can see here, this is mucogingival junction. So if your recession is going beyond this point, then it is class 2, 3 or 4. If not, it is class 1. Now another point which we have to take into account, that the interdental bone present. Usually in class 1 and class 2, the interdental bone is completely present. In class 3 it is partially lost, and in class 4 it is severely lost. So in this case you can see, though the recession is not extending beyond the mucogingival junction, but interdental bone loss has occurred. So how to classify this gingival recession? The classification of this gingival recession is class 3, because it depends on the predictability of the root coverage, and when we know that interdental bone is partially lost, that means complete root coverage is not possible in this case. So rather than taking into account its relation to the mucogingival junction, we are taking into account its relationship with the interdental bone. The next important part of case history examination is identification of mucogingival problems. All the mucogingival problems, they basically suggest that the width of the attached gingiva is inadequate. Let us now see one by one regarding all of them. The first mucogingival problem is inadequate or high frenal attachment. Here you can appreciate the labial frenum. This is labial frenum, which is joined between the gingiva and the lip mucosa. There are 4 types of frenal attachment when we are considering the labial frenum. These are mucosal, attached, papillary and papilla penetrating. Usually the papillary and papilla penetrating kind of the frenal attachment are called as high frenal attachment. In this case you can see the frenum is attached to the attached gingiva. So this kind of the frenal attachment is called as gingival frenal attachment. If the frenal attachment is high, the treatment is frenotomy or frenectomy. Frenotomy is done when no spacing is present between the teeth, and frenectomy is done when frenal attachment is high and spacing is present between the teeth. To check whether the frenal attachment is high or not, there is a test called as tension test. Tension test for upper labial frenum. In this we have to move the lip forwards, upwards and outwards, and then we have to check the movement of the gingival margin along with frenal attachment or the blanching in the area of the gingival margin. Here you can see there is no blanching, nor the gingival margin is moving along with the frenal attachment. For lower, it is forward, outwards and downwards, and then we are checking whether the blanching is present or any kind of the movement of gingival margin along with the frenal attachment. In both upper and lower labial frenums, there is no movement of the gingival margin along with the frenal attachment, suggesting that this frenal attachment is not high. Next mucogingival problem is inadequate width of the attached gingiva. First I will show how to measure the width of the attached gingiva. As I have described earlier, the roll test is done to identify mucogingival junction. Here you can see this is mucogingival junction. The first measurement to measure the width of the attached gingiva is measurement of width of keratinized gingiva. The keratinized gingiva is measured from gingival margin to the mucogingival junction. So this is in total width of the keratinized gingiva. After that I will be measuring sulcus depth, which is around 4 mm. The width of the keratinized gingiva was around 8 mm. So I will subtract the sulcus depth from width of the keratinized gingiva, and the width of the attached gingiva which I am getting is 4 mm. It indicates that width of the attached gingiva is adequate. In palatal region, to measure the width of the attached gingiva, whole of the soft tissue to the palate is attached. In case of the lower anterior teeth, if you are measuring the width of the attached gingiva on the lingual side, it is usually 1 mm, and as you go posteriorly, it increases up to 9 mm. Moving on to the next mucogingival problem, that is inadequate vestibular depth. The vestibular depth should be adequate because it indicates whether the patient can perform oral hygiene methods properly or not. To check whether the vestibular depth is adequate or not, you have to place the finger inside the vestibule, ask your patient to close in centric occlusion, and then check whether your lip is moving or not. Here you can see my lip has moved. That indicates the vestibular depth in the anterior region is inadequate. That means if a patient is using brush, patient will not be able to keep the brush properly inside the vestibular depth. Now let us say this on the posterior teeth also. Ask again your patient. Here you can see there is no movement of my finger. So my finger is not getting displaced from the vestibular depth. That indicates the vestibular depth is adequate. In case the vestibular depth is not adequate, then we have to go for vestibuloplasty. That means we have to deepen the sulcus from here so that the vestibule length will get increased. One important test which is routinely carried out is a test for trauma from occlusion, and this test is called as Fremitus test. A common question will be asked to you that what is the difference between Fremitus and mobility. In Fremitus, we are not doing anything and we are just checking the vibratory pattern when patient is closing his jaw in centric occlusion position. But in mobility, we are actually trying to check what kind of the movement the tooth is having with digital pressure or with one finger and with one instrument. In Fremitus test, the first point to remember is that your finger should be wet. We are going to assess the vibratory pattern of the teeth, so your finger should be wet. The finger is kept partially on teeth surface and partially on gingiva, and then ask your patient to close in centric occlusion. बंद करा ताई. And here you are trying to feel the vibrations when patient is closing the jaw. ठीक. If the vibrations are mild, then it is grade 1 Fremitus. If they are moderate, it is grade 2, and if they are severe, it is called as grade 3 Fremitus test. To assess deposits present on the teeth like plaque, calculus and stains, and to motivate the patient, we use a solution, and this solution is called as disclosing solution. To assess local deposits present on the tooth surface, we use a solution which is called as disclosing solution. Disclosing agents, they are also available in wafer forms and tablets form also. Here we will be demonstrating the disclosing solution to you. Disclosing solution is applied to the tooth surface. You have to be careful that it should not touch gingiva. After that, you have to wait for a period of 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, when disclosing solution is washed off, you can appreciate the stains present on the tooth surface. There are different disclosing agents which can be used, which include erythrocin blue or two-tone dye solution. In two-tone dye solution, the old plaque is stained blue, while as new plaque is stained red. Here you can appreciate the red color staining on the tooth surfaces, and this is because of the new plaque present. These disclosing solutions can be used for different indices, for different research studies, and also for motivating the patient to show that their oral hygiene maintenance is not proper. Once we have done with periodontal examination, the next part is writing provisional diagnosis. After that, you are going to go for different kind of investigations. Then you will be writing the final diagnosis and then prognosis. We all know that prognosis is of two types, that is individual tooth prognosis and overall prognosis. And after that, we will move to the treatment plan. We all know that there are 4 phases of treatment plan: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 and phase 4. And the commonly asked question during this is, what is the sequence of treatment plan? You all have to remember the sequence is 1, 4, 2 and then 3. With this, I will like to wish you all the best for your case history examination, and everything regarding the case history will be given in a PDF form, and the link is given below this video.